What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. Today I'm going to show you some macros that I've created with GNOME Sequencer Enhanced, an extremely powerful add-on that allows you to create robust macros that can perform most, if not all, of your rotation with a single button. This can be extremely useful if you have a disability like myself, or if you just want to be lazy. Bear in mind that these macros can be extremely helpful, but they also have their limits, so they're made primarily for those who are playing the game at a more casual level. But feel free to use them as you see fit. If you'd like to learn more about GNOME Sequencer and how to use it, I recommend that you head over to Wow Lazy Macros. You can find links to all of that and to import strings for these macros in the description. Today we're going to check out the macro that I've created for Protection Warriors in Season of Discovery, and let me tell you, warriors are extremely difficult to macro in Classic WoW just because of their playstyle and how they function, but I've done the best I can, and I do feel like I've managed to pull off something that could help you out. It's something that's definitely making things a little bit easier for me. We'll go over the macro in a bit, but there's also a lot of other things that we need to go over. First off, I want to point out that just try to remember that I am trying my best to get every class leveled up so I can make as many guides as I can. These patches are coming pretty quick. We'll be moving into phase 2 fairly soon, actually, so I don't even think I want to be able to keep up with all the phases, but I'm just kind of going with things as I get there and releasing what I can for people, and Warrior is definitely one of the most requested classes from me, so this is the best I've got. So we'll go over, things one step at a time, but that's why you're looking at a level 20 protection warrior as opposed to a level 25. And remember, I don't have every rune available, but I do feel like I have everything I need to make a macro that should function fairly well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what runes I have. Now, under chest, you can see here that I only have one of the 4 runes available, and that is Blood Frenzy. This is great for generating extra rage with bleed damage. So if you're using Rend, for example, you'll generate even more rage, which I do use Rend, and we'll go over all the abilities I use in the macro here in a little bit. But another great option is this one, Flagellation, just increasing the damage you deal whenever you use Blood Rage or Berserker Rage. That's nice. I mean, obviously. Then there's Raging Blow. That's a great rune, but I don't know how much you'd want to use this one with Protection Warriors, but either way, it's there. And then, of course, you've got Warbringer. This is a great rune, I think, for Protection Warriors in particular, because then you'll be able to use Charge when you're in defensive stance, and that could be very, very useful. So that's probably the other rune that I would look into getting, but for now, I'm just using this one for the extra rage generation, and that is very nice. So next up, we have Legs. Now, obviously, you're not going to go for the two-hander, and then, of course, there's what I'm going with, which is Furious Thunder. This is a great rune. This makes it so that you can use Thunderclap in defensive stance, which is very useful. It also generates more threat, and the debuff is even more effective as well. So this just makes it a lot easier to use Thunderclap using it in protection, in defensive stance. That's the word. So that's the one I'm going with. It just makes Thunderclap a lot more useful. So there you go. Of course, the other rune option I think that would be viable would be Consumed by Rage. This is just such a great rune. It takes a bit to get it, but once you do have it, then you're good to go, and it's a great rune. I mean, it just will be probably one of the best runes for any warrior, really. So that's obviously another option. It does change a little bit up how you play. It would certainly affect the macro if you're using it, but we'll go over that once we look at the macro. But yeah, for me, I'm using this one. So then we get down here at the bottom where I have the most runes. There's a lot of great runes in here for sure. I'd say that the 3 most, viable for sure. Victory Rush is probably one you'll get the earliest. This can be very useful, for regenerating health, obviously. Then, of course, there's Endless Rage. That's obviously another great rune that you can go with for sure, just to, give yourself, extra rage generation and giving you the ability to use your abilities more often. That's obviously nice. But I think the one you're going to want to go with, the one I'm going with, is Devastate. This is like just a Protection Warrior trademark for any future warrior. So this is the one I'm going with. This is in Classic WoW. This basically just enhances your your Sunder armor, I should say. It makes it more of a consistently used ability, probably your main ability that you're going to be using once you get Devastate. So there's that. Yeah, that's what I'm going with. I think that's probably what I want to be sticking with throughout the protection warrior experience. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at my talent build. Now please remember, as I always like to remind everybody this, I'm not an authority on talent builds for classic WoW, especially in Season of Discovery, just because of how things can change up based on the runes you have. So don't take what I'm going with as what you should go with. Nothing really is going to affect how the macro works, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just kind of messing around. I'm going with a more DPS oriented protection warrior because most of what I do is out in the world leveling up and just doing things solo. So I'm going with more of a like damage focused, build the best I can at this early stage in the process, but I'm sure I can switch things over. I imagine, if you're going to be a tank, then you'd want to go down the protection tree, going for the extra block, going down here trying to get last stand, that kind of stuff. So, there you go. What I'm going with is, like I said, it's more of like a DPS oriented, getting extra bleed damage, going for deep wounds next, and then extra parries, obviously nice for sure. And then one of my dilemmas, so kind of like with my arms warrior, like this is fine. I mean, you could go for tactical mastery, retain extra rage when you switch stances, but I don't really switch stances. I don't know if I just haven't felt the need to really that often, so I don't switch stances. I guess if I was gonna switch to charge, maybe I would do that, but if you get Warbringer, you're not gonna need to do that. So I've been putting my points into this one here, improved Thunderclap, and it's been very useful just because it makes Thunderclap use less rage, and that's always going to be nice. So that way you're getting more value out of your Thunderclap and having more rage available. So I do use Thunderclap fairly often, especially in the macro. So that's what I chose to go with. I'm sure it's it's probably not the most useful one, but yeah, obviously really I imagine maybe if I did get Warbringer, I might switch over to improved charge. That might be useful because I'd be using charge a little bit more often, but it just depends on what you're doing, how you're playing or whatever. But this is what I'm going with. I think more traditional tanks would want to go this way, but yeah, like I said, I'm not an authority on this. This is just kind of what I'm messing around with. So people like to know what my build is, and I just like to show it off. But with that being said, let's finally go ahead and take a look at what the macro can do. We'll type in /GSE, opens up Gnome Sequencer. Now this is a macro called Keph Protection, and it's an all-in-one macro for protection warriors. There are a couple of abilities that I probably need to remind people that you'll have to use separately, but let's go ahead and take a look at what this macro actually does. First up is Revenge. Obviously, the macro will use that ability as soon as it's available. It'll follow that up by using Thunderclap. Now that we have if you have the rune for Thunderclap, then this is what you would use. If you're not using that rune, then you could probably just remove this from the macro entirely if you want to. But yeah, having Furious Thunder makes Thunderclap usable. Even if you have Furious Thunder, you probably don't need to be using Thunderclap too often, but I've gone ahead and thrown it in here. So again, either way, if you don't want to use Thunderclap all the time, then feel free to remove this from the macro, but I've got it in here just for simplicity's sake. So it's entirely up to you what you want to do. Managing your rage can be very difficult. So, it's understandable either way. Thunderclap tends to be more of a utility anyway, pair it with Demoralizing Roar, and that sort of thing. So like I said, it's up to you entirely. And then of course we have Sunder Armor. This is kind of your main, rage spender that you're going to be using. I mean, essentially what you do right now at this phase as a protection warrior is Revenge and Sunder Armor. Those are the main things you're going to be doing. And, again, it's one of those things where with Sunder Armor, you're just using it as much as you need to with the extra rage. If you're using Sunder Armor, I guess to the point where you're not using anything else, then feel free to remove Sunder Armor from the macro. If you're using the rune that makes you need to pull up your rage to get the benefit, then you would obviously want to remove Sunder Armor from the macro entirely. And there is an argument to be stated, I suppose, and it's fairly reasonable that as a warrior you may not even need to use a macro at all, once you start getting rid of things. So this is again, it's just optional. It's just a method for playing. We'll go over that more here in just a little bit after we go through the rest of it. But then we get down to the bottom here, and you have your standard targeting fare, start attack, that sort of thing, making sure that you're always doing your melee stuff. And then we have a cast sequence, reset equals target, rend, and null. And what this is going to do is when you first attack an enemy, once you target something and you go in for an attack, the first thing the macro is going to do is cast rend, and then it will stop casting rend. It won't cast rend anymore, and then it'll go through the main sequence. And that's basically how the macro is going to work. Okay, so making sure you get that rend in there for that bleed damage can be very helpful. And if you switch targets, switch to a different target, then you will apply rend to that target. If you leave combat, go back in and pick a new target, or even the same target, then you will reapply rend. It's the first thing you will do whenever you have a new target. Okay, so that's basically how it's going to work, just for that extra bit of bleed damage. It's very nice for leveling for sure, and just getting that extra rage in there is always going to be nice. So then of course we have blood rage. The macro is going to be using that one on cooldown, and that's pretty much everything. Now sometimes I like to put in a modifier line in here, a cast modifier shift, rend. That way, if you want to reapply rend because of how rend works, I might put that in, but it's been causing issues for me lately. For some reason, it's making it so that I do nothing but use rend, even if I'm not holding down shift. I don't know why that is, but that's why I don't have it in right now. I will test it, and so it might be in, so you can check it later. If you use this macro, if you import it in, you can check it and see if that modifier is in there, so then you can hold down shift to use rend, or you could just put rend on the separate button. Speaking of which, this is what the macro can do. There are a lot of other abilities, obviously, that aren't included in the macro. You have your obvious things like demoralizing roar, battle shout, charge, those sort of utility things are never going to be added into the macro. And then you have all of your different rage spending abilities. I mean, there are so many different ones that you can use. Heroic strike, cleave, sunder armor, which that one's actually included. Thunderclap, and how these abilities work. I've included a couple of those. It's debatable whether or not you want to be using them as often as the macro is going to be having you use them. And obviously in abilities like heroic strike and cleave, if you're trying to use those in a macro, then your macro is going to be doing nothing but those abilities, and it's going to be using up all your rage. You won't be using any of your other abilities. So there is a reasonable stance to take that maybe it might be easier to not even use a macro at all. That's entirely an option, because again, like, the main thing you're going to be doing as a protection warrior for the most part is using revenge when it's available, and then otherwise using sunder armor. Occasionally you're going to cast demoralizing shout. You're going to keep battle shout up. Occasionally you might use thunderclap, especially if you're like trying to, if you're using furious thunder, you're getting that extra threat in there, and obviously making the enemy swing slower, so that way you're not taking as much damage. That's obviously a great thing to do as well. That's really all you're going to be doing. Maybe you can throw in a rend there. Maybe that's not even entirely necessary, especially depending on what runes you're using. And then of course, if you're using consume, the consume rune, then you're going to be needing to pull up your rage anyways. You're not going to want to be spamming at all. And if you are using this macro, remember to make sure that you're using your weapon swings for the extra damage and rage generation. So like what I do is I spam the macro in between swings, and then I stop so that I can get my weapon swing off, and then I spam the macro again for a little bit. So, like I said, it's a lot, like, it's an easy class to play. Warrior's fairly easy to play. There aren't a lot of different abilities. There's a lot of downtime, honestly, like you're just kind of reacting to when things become available, when you have enough rage to use something like that. So, that's kind of how it works. But again, for simplicity's sake, you can give this macro a try, see if it helps you out. Feel free to use it or not use it, as you see fit. Feel free to modify it if you want to, but hopefully this will help you out. If not, hopefully you'll understand, it helps you understand why you might not even want to macro. I obviously share these because people ask for them, and I try to do my best. So yeah, here you go. This is the best I've got, and hopefully, it'll help you out somehow. So feel free to let me know what you think about it in the comments below. With all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.